So the title of this talk is Who Will We Be? I like acronyms and mnemonics, things that can help you remember lists of things. I like them when I can remember what they stand for. You may have learned something similar when you were in school. My very enthusiastic mother just served noodles. Well, that's how it goes now. It used to say she served 9 pizzas when Pluto was still a planet. But my very enthusiastic mother just served us noodles, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Ha. AWOL, AWOL, absent without leave, ASAP, as soon as possible. There are dozens of these for the digital world. As I text with my daughter, I'm forever having to look up what's the new acronym. BRB is be right back. ROFL, roll on the floor laughing. PNTY, please and thank you. You may know HOMES for the Great Lakes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. My favorite is Roy G. Biv. And I remember the day as an adult that I learned it. Did you know that Roy G. Biv stands for the colors of the rainbow? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And of course, our beloved SCUUF, St. Croix Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. That's 15 syllables down to 1. Now that's a time saver. I learned a new acronym this week, and it's been rolling around in my head. And some of you may know this. VUCA, V-U-C-A, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. VUCA, V-U-C-A, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We are living in a VUCA world, in VUCA times. This concept originated with students at the U.S. Army War College in the 1980s to describe the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity of the world after the Cold War. And it became popular among business leaders and management types in the early 2000s. Forbes magazine unpacked the concept this way. Volatility refers to the speed of change in an industry, a market, the world in general. The more volatile the world is, the more and faster things are changing. Uncertainty refers to the extent to which we can confidently predict the future. The more uncertain the world is, the harder it is to predict the future. Complexity refers to the number of factors that we need to take into account, the variety and the relationship between them. The more complex the world is, the harder it is to analyze. And ambiguity refers to a lack of clarity about how to interpret something. When information is either incomplete, it's contradicting, or it's too inaccurate to draw conclusions. I'm going to share with you a visual of the dimensions of VUCA. One moment. I may be sharing too much, but let's get this up here. Here's a good visual. You see, volatility is that, low volatility is that wave that doesn't have much wave. High volatility got a bunch of bumps. Low uncertainty, we can see where things are going. High uncertainty, it's hard to see very much. Low complexity, it's easy to navigate the points. Higher complexity, it's harder to analyze those relationships. Low ambiguity, we can see things pretty clearly. High ambiguity, it's really fuzzy and hard to get clarity. on something. And if we only were navigating one or maybe two of these high areas, we could probably manage. But it's when we are navigating all four, as we are at this time of pandemic, the lack of our ability to keep up, to predict, to analyze and interpret the signs and signals of our social fabric is what makes it really challenging these days. And many of us feel this challenge not only in the news that we hear and consume, but we feel it in our bodies, this inability to keep up, to predict where it's going, to analyze all of the data, and to interpret what it will mean for us. Okay, so that may sound like a lot of business school gobbledygook. Stay with me here. I think the appropriate question that arises in our time is not how will we get out of this, but who will we be? Every organization that is awake in the country, indeed on the planet, is wondering how it will survive, what resilience it has to the crisis, what will we learn from navigating this current crisis that will help us survive the coming climate crisis. Do we matter? Does this organization matter? And more importantly, by far than how will we be together, is really, I think, the bedrock question: who will we be when we are together? Do you see that distinction? Not just how are we going to meet, but who will we be as we meet? What do we stand for in the world? What would the world lose if we were not here in it? Those are appropriate questions, whether we're in the midst of a crisis or not. They become especially important in this moment. These are questions that are worthy of a religious community. Unitarian Universalist minister Jake Morrill, who is the minister of our congregation in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, says that to be a church in a VUCA world, we need to ask, what are our clarifying guidelines and assumptions? What are the implications of those guidelines? And what will we do with those assumptions and implications? Reverend Jake says that there are 4 things that we can expect. That society will stop and start through at least the fall of 2021. That's probably the earliest that we're going to be able to have a vaccine in our arms, the very earliest that we may be able to have a vaccine in our arms. That there will be a long-lasting economic recession. That climate change and technology, by which I don't just mean the internet, but I mean the ways, the supply lines and the ways that the world works, that climate change and technology will disrupt daily life. There will be disruptions. And that we will have more of a hybrid society from now on, meaning more online interaction and small group engagement rather than large gatherings. It's hard to imagine going to a movie theater or a big street protest, as sometimes we're able to do here in Minneapolis, or even church in the coming days. So we need to figure out what that may mean. If we work with those assumptions, then what will that mean and who will we be? I want to recognize a few things in this moment and given these assumptions. I want to recognize that as I look at your faces, every one of us in this group today are immigrants to this digital world. We did not grow up with this. And the fact that you are here experiencing worship in a room together with 26 other people is something that you may not ever have done before a few weeks ago, or to have done in a sustained way. The learning curve, the digital learning curve in the last 2 months for many of us has been great. And the fact that we're even here together says something about our resilience and our ability to adapt. We are immigrants to this digital world. We need to recognize that we are not the first to undergo great societal disruptions. Throughout human history, there have been great societal disruptions. In the past century, there were many, and there will continue to be them. We are resilient people, but there are things coming that we've never experienced before, and it behooves us to look back to resilience from our past. Immigrants who left other countries, left everything they knew to come to these shores. Survivors of the Holocaust who completely had everything stripped away from them. Middle-class folks, a lot of middle-class folks who had everything stripped away. And the survivors learned to build something new. People who survived plagues before learned to build something new. I think of the vast social disruption that even having books in your hand meant that everything changed. Not all at once, but soon, everybody. Now we all can have books in our hands. That wasn't always the case. At one point, nobody could vote. The world was run by kingdoms and monarchies and feudal overlords. Democracy was not a given, but it changed everything. Upheavals have happened, and people survive them. Let's find out who we will be as we survive. And I think it's really crucial to recognize that we are still each other's people, that we still need human connection. The only human connection we can have right now is me looking at this little green light at the top of my screen and believing that you are there, receiving it on the other end as you see each other's faces. That's the human connection we can have for now. Perhaps it's enjoying a sandwich from a social distance. Perhaps it is sharing in the great joy of a birth of a grandbaby that you know someday you will be able to hold. It's saying goodbye in tender, difficult ways during this time when we can't gather for a memorial service. But we are still each other's people. I want to propose another set of words for VUCA that can sustain us as we make meaning out of this disruption, that can guide SCUUF into a new age. In this new age, can we find the way to be, will we be, vital, bringing something to the world that is sustaining, universal, speaking to our common humanity, creative, willing to try new ideas and ways of being, and accepting of what was, what is, and curious about what will be. I'm going to name these words for VUCA again in this new context. How can we be, will we be, vital, bringing something to the world that is sustaining, universal, speaking to common humanity, creative, willing to try new ideas and new ways of being, and accepting of what was, what is, and curious about what will be. Here together in this religious community is where we bring our joys and sorrows, where we ask questions, where we make meaning, where we build resilience and hope. May we be the VUCA church in the VUCA world. I'm going to stop speaking for a moment and invite you to share a little dialogue. What does this bring up for you? I'm going to stop recording for right now to close us with a reading that has been making the rounds on the internet this week. And it's from Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote the book, The Body is Not an Apology. The quote was attributed for a while to Brené Brown, whom I love and quote frequently, but she was actually referencing what Sonia and Renee Taylor had said. And Taylor says this: "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all humanity and nature." May it be so, and amen.
Bravo.